Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the Internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1372 of This Week in Amateur Radio.
Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world and broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States and podcast on the Internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1372 of This Week in Amateur Radio.
Are you ready for Field Day 2025? We will have some suggestions to make Field Day fun for everyone. There are only 2 commissioners left at the FCC. What does that mean for FCC operations? We'll have the story. New York State lawmakers vote to stop the New York City Police Department's attempt to block citizens from listening. Papua New Guinea's national broadcaster reintroduces shortwave radio nationwide. Looking for work? The ARRL just announced job openings at its Newington, Connecticut headquarters. We will have the results of the 2025 section manager appointments. Ham Radio 2025, Europe's largest ham fest, is coming soon. The Wireless Institute of Australia responds to the proposed IIRU restructuring plan. A 9th grader from Ukraine invents an antenna that can revolutionize drones. A citizens band operator is fined by the FCC. The World Radio Operator Foundation announces its 2025 grant recipients. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Ono Benchop, VK6, FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will answer the question, can you be a professional amateur? Our own amateur radio historian Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us aboard the Wayback Machine to the year 1922, where we find that amateurs were making progress taming the QRM problem. Sometimes the solution did not involve a new invention or even technology at all. We will stop by and visit Bill Saylor's AJ8B in the DX Corner with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studios here in cloudy and rainy Naugatuck, Connecticut, where I think this makes 13 out of 14 weekends in a row where it's rained, I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I want to wish my wife a happy 11th anniversary, I'm Josh Muller, AA4WX.
And reporting from our news bureau this week in Syracuse, New York, from the Museum of Science and Technology Station K2MST, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our Trade New York News Bureau, where we're getting ready for Father's Day weekend, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the western Catskills of upstate New York, where the sweet corn is already up about 3 inches in the field across the street, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where summer has arrived, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, cranking up the air conditioning.
Leading off the news this week, you can almost hear the synthesizer lead from the musical act Europe's 1986 hit The Final Countdown playing on the air. We are just 2 weeks away from 2025 ARRL Field Day, taking place on June 28th and 29th. With suggestions on how to make your field day the best one ever, we go to League headquarters where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report.
As the excitement builds, 1,067 sites are listed now on the station locator tool. Each one of them has a lot of work to do between now and the first CQ Field Day transmission. But now is the time to check and double-check everything, according to ARRL Radio Sport and Regulatory Information Manager Bart Janke, W9JJ. Check all of your gear and accessories. Put it on the air, make sure there are no problems, organize your power chain from the generator to all of the cables, he suggested. Going through all of the equipment now, including antennas and antenna support structures, will keep any nasty surprises at bay when it's time to activate for the event. It's also time to check on your people and places. Reach out to everyone who said they wanted to come and make sure they still are able to do so. Build an operating schedule, said Janke. It's also a prudent time to check with the property owner where you intend to hold the activation and follow up with the local media and town officials that have been invited. With the heat of the summer bearing down, make sure there's enough water and sunscreen for the activation. The double check of supplies now could spare you from unplanned errands during field day. More than anything, being prepared now will help you be present during field day, said ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX. This is a great opportunity to share the joy of community of the amateur radio and people who may not get a chance to participate in it often, or it could be a first introduction. Prepare now so you can have fun on the weekend. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL has many resources to help your activation thrive during the event. All the rules and information are at www.arrl.org/Field Day. Order your 2025 ARRL Field Day merch by Thursday, June 19th to ensure your shipment arrives in time for Field Day.
After the departure of one Republican and one Democratic commissioner on Friday, the Federal Communications Commission is down to 2 members, falling below the quorum threshold for what's typically a 5-person panel. Commissioners Nathan Symington and Jeffrey Sparks stepped down at the end of the week. That leaves Republican Chair Brendan Carr and Democratic Commissioner Ana Gomez as the 2 remaining voting members. President Donald Trump has nominated Republican Senate staffer Olivia Trusty to the commission, but the chamber has yet to vote on her confirmation, which left the agency deadlocked even before these departures. The FCC is in charge of everything from broadband regulations and subsidies funds to telecommunications mergers enforcement to spectrum auctions. Without a 3-member quorum, some of that work and the agenda of Trump-aligned Carr is left in limbo. Starks and Symington both announced the date of their departures earlier this week, though Starks indicated in March that he planned to step down. Neither offered specific reasons for their departure. Carr indicated he intends to keep up the pace, writing in a blog post that the show must go on. There's a lot that Carr can at least try to do while awaiting a quorum, even without another Republican commissioner to vote on more partisan proposals. Carr has already used so-called delegated authority to let the FCC's various bureaus carry out the agency's work without a vote from the full commission. Gomez and Carr can also operate as a 2-member board of the commissioners under Rule 0.212, allowing them to do most things they normally would besides issue final rules or actions, according to Public Knowledge Senior Vice President Harold Feld. That could hold up any final action to roll back a host of regulations through Carr's Delete initiative, spurred by a Trump executive order, but allow for new notices of proposed rulemakings or other first steps, as long as they can both agree on them. Even if the commission can likely accomplish most of its day-to-day work, Feld warns that operating without a quorum under confusing legal precedents could be risky. It puts a cloud over everything, he says. It could also cause problems if the Supreme Court issues an awaited ruling on the future of the Universal Service Fund, which helps subsidize communication services for rural and low-income households and requires changes that would need to be approved by a commission vote.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
New York State lawmakers voted to stop the NYPD's attempt to block its radio communications from the public on Thursday. With the bill expected to head to Governor Hochul's desk, the Keep Police Radio Public Act was passed by both the state Senate and the state Assembly, with the sponsor of the legislature arguing the proposal strikes a proper balance in the battle between transparency and sensitive information. Preserving access to police radio is critical for a free press and to preserve the freedoms and protections afforded by the public availability, State Senator Michael Gianaris said in a statement. As encrypted radio usage grows, my proposal strikes the proper balance between legitimate law enforcement needs and the rights and interests of New Yorkers, he said. The bill, sponsored in the Assembly by lawmaker Karine Reyes, meant to make the real-time police radio communications accessible to emergency services organizations and reporters. Sensitive information would still be kept private, according to the legislation. The NYPD began a plan in late 2023 to fully encrypt its radio broadcasts as part of a massive system upgrade that quickly led to outcry from press advocates and local officials. The move made it more difficult for journalists to cover breaking news and less information flowing to the public. But the NYPD, which has now shielded most radio communication, has argued that making the network go dark was necessary, a point the department repeated on Thursday. Encrypting police radio communications is necessary for both the safety of enforcement as well to protect the privacy interests of the victims and witnesses, an NYPD spokesperson said. Requiring the NYPD to provide real-time access could jeopardize officer safety and victim privacy. Hochul's office didn't provide much insight into the state's thinking on the bill. The governor will review all legislation that passes both houses of legislature, a spokesman said on Thursday. The proposal would cover police agencies across the Empire State.
Papua New Guinea's National Broadcasting Corporation is aiming to reintroduce shortwave radio to achieve the government's goal of 100% broadcast coverage by 2030. This week, the state-owned broadcaster hosted a workshop on the reintroduction of shortwave radio transmission, bringing together key government agencies and other stakeholders. NBC Managing Director Cora New said the proposed reintroduction of shortwave radio can only be achieved through a collaborative effort. He said it is important because it ensures remote communities have access to timely news and information. NBC's Executive Director of Engineering, Saloka Luwangu, explained the importance of shortwave while making a comparison with frequency modulation, shortwave, and medium wave transmission. FM is line of sight. If you see the tower, you receive the signal. If you don't see the tower, you don't receive the signal, he said. Medium wave has a wider coverage compared to FM. Coverage for FM is more for cities and towns. When you talk about medium wave, you talk regional now. When you talk short wave, you talk countrywide. That's why we are talking. Shortwave can do it for us with all our rugged mountains and scattered islands. This transition is timely and important for wider coverage, as it enables broader and more reliable broadcast reach across the country's rugged terrain. NBC also believes this shift will reduce dependency on costly hardware, making maintenance and upgrades easier while ensuring improved emergency communications and public awareness.
ARRL is looking for some new members of its Newington, Connecticut-based headquarters staff. There are several roles for which they are seeking qualified candidates. If you're into amateur radio, ARRL is a tremendous place to work. The membership manager is responsible for leading efforts related to ARRL membership growth, engagement, and retention. This role serves as the primary point of contact for ARRL's membership system and collaborates cross-functionally to support the organization's membership goals. The advertising sales manager is responsible for developing advertising revenue across ARRL's print and digital platforms, including magazines, media, and sponsorships. This role involves prospecting new clients and cultivating current relationships, developing targeted advertising products and campaigns, managing ad sales operations, and collaborating cross-functionally with marketing and production teams. The manager also provides regular performance reporting, budgeting, and forecasting to senior leadership, and represents ARRL at amateur radio events. Other open positions include production coordinator and senior RFI lab engineer. Among the qualifications for each position is a desire for experienced radio amateurs, individuals who will thrive in a collaborative, results-driven environment, and a commitment to advancing ARRL's mission. Central Connecticut offers the best of all worlds: vibrant, modern urban life, quaint agrarian communities steeped in American history, coastal fun, and all the amenities you expect. Plus, you're a quick drive to the mountains, New York City, or Boston. There's a thriving local ham community that will welcome you as well. Descriptions for each position are listed on the ARRL website at www.arrl.org/careers. If you have amateur radio experience and a desire to work at ARRL, apply for one of these jobs by submitting your resume and cover letter to hr@arrl.org.
There is a Russian shortwave station that has transmitted a monotonous buzzing sound since at least 1982. Broadcasting on 4625 kilohertz, the signal occasionally interrupts its distinctive buzz with Russian voice messages, consisting of numbers and names. Nobody outside the Russian military circles knows its true purpose, although theories range from maintaining communications channels during nuclear attacks to tracking atmospheric conditions. The station briefly went offline in 2010, only to return with increased activity that continues to baffle listeners worldwide. Meanwhile, a currently active digital number station broadcasts automatic Spanish number sequences alongside bursts of encrypted data. The signal originates from Cuba and is believed to communicate with intelligence agents operating in North America. These transmissions continue unabated, suggesting ongoing espionage activities. The station uses modern digital modes alongside traditional voice numbers, showing the evolution of these secretive communications methods.
2025 ARRL Field Day is just away, and there's a category for every operator. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, is here with all the details.
The excitement is building. Most clubs have their activations planned. In the last 2 weeks, 350 more sites have been added to the Field Day locator, with a total of 886 listed as of June 5th. ARRL Field Day is a great way to connect with your local amateur radio community, for technician class operators to get on lower HF bands, to shake down your portable operating gear, and to have fun and enjoy the camaraderie of your fellow hams. If you can't make it out to an activation near you, or you just rather get on for a little bit from your home, never fear. There is an operating class for you. According to Field Day rules, Class D stations are home stations operating from permanent or licensed station locations using commercial power, and Class E stations are home stations using emergency power for transmitters and receivers. Class E stations, by the way, may work all Field Day stations. ARRL Field Day is fun, but the outreach value is serious, according to ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX. Each year, ARRL Field Day is the driving force for official proclamations declaring amateur radio a vital part of communities, she said. States like Hawaii and Nebraska, among others, have joined with towns and counties around the country to declare the importance of amateur radio. Having the governor or even a town council recognize the value that the hams in their community provide is invaluable, continued Harrop. Not only does it honor the work of amateur radio volunteers, but it raises awareness of ham radio among the public. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Class D stations can count contacts with any other station for QSO credit. If you're operating on a radio plugged into a power supply connected to your wall outlet, this is for you. Class E are home stations using emergency power for transmitters and receivers. Class E may work all Field Day stations. If you're operating off a battery, solar, wind, or any other off-grid redundancy, you're in Class E. To determine your exchange for ARRL Field Day, use the number of transmitters in simultaneous use, the class of operation, and your ARRL or Radio Amateurs of Canada section prefix. For example, if an amateur in Nebraska turned on their shore-powered home station and operated in this event, they'd be 1 Delta November Echo. See the full rules for more information and find a list of ARRL sections at this link. If a proclamation has been issued in your area, please send it to ARRL via pr@arrl.org.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
ARRL announces the results of the recent section manager nomination period for the term beginning October 1st, 2025. The following were declared elected with no opposition. Amanda Alden, K1DDN in Colorado. Joe Whitney, KA7LJQ in Eastern Washington. Hank Blackwood, K4HYJ in Georgia. Diana Feinberg, AI6DF in Los Angeles. Dr. Carol Milazzo, KP4MD in the Sacramento Valley. Dr. Antonis Papatsaras, AA600 in San Francisco. Stuart Wolf, KF5NIX in South Texas. And Daryl Dan Ringer, K8WV in West Virginia. Due to resolicitation, the following section managers will continue in office as well. James Ferguson, N5KLE in Arkansas, and Garth Crow, WY7GC in Wyoming. Craig McVeigh, N0CSM, was elected as section manager of the ARRL Nevada section for a term that begins July 1st. The ARRL field organization is the grassroots core that makes up the 60,000 volunteers among ARRL membership. It is divided into 71 sections. Each section is led by a volunteer section manager who is nominated and elected by the members of the section. Section managers serve 2-year terms.
In April this year, the Dubois County Office of Emergency Management in Indiana made the decision to migrate from analog FM to C4 FM digital for their 147.195 repeater during activations. The change was made to reduce noise during operation and increase the quality of copy. According to Gary Fritz, Whiskey Bravo 9, Lima India Bravo, operations officer for the EMA, our new Fusion repeater system was thoroughly tested to confirm its superior performance when using C4 FM. When the announcement was made to Patoka Valley Amateur Radio Club, not all the club members were enthusiastic. Since some of them did not own a Fusion-compatible radio, this decision would exclude them from emergency operations with Skywarn. Fritz said that the change has brought about the desired results in message quality, as proven by recent Skywarn activation during severe weather. We found that by using C4 FM, our units are now able to check in crystal clear from locations that were previously impossible. A number of local amateurs remain unconvinced regarding the move to digital. Ruben Montgomery, Kilo Alpha 9, Romeo Charlie Mike, said that his main concern is centered primarily on the lack of access to the emergency communications by hams without fusion radios and by visitors who are passing through the area. With a variety of digital platforms, he also sees great difficulty in picking one mode to the exclusion of all others. Regarding participation, Fritz reported that the public and all amateur radio operators can continue to monitor net communications through audio streaming over Broadcastify.
Never mind what primetime TV has to offer. Hams who have been missing a chance to make contacts through amateur television will have something to celebrate soon. Ham TV was the digital amateur television transmitter operating on the Columbus module of the ISS until failure took it out of service back in 2019. Its repairs back here on Earth were completed and the newly invigorated Ham TV was returned to the ISS via SpaceX CRS-30 in March of 2021. 2024. ARISS reports that astronauts will complete the reinstallation in late June in preparation for more contacts with schools around the world. Ham TV uses the DBBS protocol in the 13-centimeter band to transmit digital video and audio in MPEG-2 format. ARISS has high hopes that Ham TV will become a long-running series without having to resort to reruns.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is in the process of temporarily taking its radio stations off the air for scheduled updates. As some parts of the United States enter hurricane season, which officially began on June 1st, the National Weather Service is continuing with its nationwide update of their Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System. The system is used for weather data processing and communications, two functions that are especially critical during storms and other weather-related emergencies. The upgrades will be taking more than 1,000 radio stations of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration off the air on a rolling basis for 2 to 3 days in a scheduled rollout for their 122 weather forecast offices. Broadcasters and ham radio groups have expressed concern about not having access to these emergency stations during those periods. NOAA Weather Radio, known as the voice of the National Weather Service, is a nationwide network of radio stations broadcasting continuous weather information directly from the nearest weather forecast office. These stations broadcast official weather service warnings, watches, forecasts, and other hazard information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The NWS is using social media and other means to inform citizens in the affected areas when their stations will be out of service. They are also encouraging citizens to rely on alternate sources for weather warnings during the outage, including local TV and radio, weather apps, and the NWS websites.
An Illinois man faces a $25,000 penalty from the FCC for unauthorized operation of a citizens band radio. The agency announced its decision on May 30th, 2025, 2 years to the day after it issued a notice of apparent liability against Jamie John Leon. The agency's Enforcement Bureau said that he repeatedly voided his operating authority by sending nonverbal, indecipherable sound effects over long periods, causing malicious interference and engaging in one-way transmissions. According to the FCC document, Leon did not file a response to the 2023 Notice of Liability. Citizens Band Radio is not a licensed service in the United States. Operators retain the privilege of using CB by agreeing to comply with relevant regulations stipulated in the Communications Act of 1934. Meanwhile, the Australian Communications and Media Authority has proposed that reported abuses of citizens band regulations that are deemed serious should be referred to the police for further investigation. Citizen band operators are covered by a class license in Australia under the Radio Communications Act. The current regulations are set to sunset on the 1st of October. Public comment is being accepted through the 15th of July.
Special event stations are popular around the world and a great source of fun and excitement for organizers and QSO chasers. They can also be a fantastic tool for outreach, allowing you to demonstrate amateur radio and encourage people to find out more. But how do you organize an event to achieve all those objectives? The RSGB has just launched a new web section that focuses on special event stations. For RSGB members and affiliated clubs, there is an online guide called the SES Cookbook, which offers a wide range of practical guidance to help you deliver the best experience for your visitors and the organizers. The guide covers a wide range of topics, including how to apply for an SES call sign, the stages of the planning process, publicizing your event to attract visitors, and how to make a good number of contacts. For non-RSGB members, there is a simple guidance document that outlines the main things to consider when planning this type of event. The new section also draws together existing information about permanent special event stations as well as QSL guidance. If you're planning an event for this year, or even for next year, now is the time to make the most of this comprehensive guide. Go to the new web section at rsgb.org/SES to find out more.
On May 31, 2025, at 16:05 UTC, The NOAA 18 S-band transmitter 4, known as STX4, experienced a power drop from 7 watts to 0.8 watts. STX4 is the only remaining transmitter used for uplink or commanding, and downlink for telemetry and global science data from the recorder. Full recovery of the S-band transmitter and its functionality is not possible. Therefore, it jeopardizes the ability to ensure safe operation of the spacecraft. Based on NOAA's requirement to responsibly manage on-orbit assets, NOAA decommissioned NOAA 18 on June 6 from 1333 to 1749 UTC, and the APT signal transmission ceasing was observed by radio amateur observers. NOAA 18 is a legacy polar operational environmental satellite and is operated with no performance or latency requirement. Users should transition to NOAA's Joint Polar Satellite System, or JPSS. JPSS provides global observations that serve as the backbone of both short and long-term forecasts, including those to help us predict and prepare for severe weather events. The 5 satellites scheduled in the fleet are currently flying the NOAA NASA Suomi National Polar Orbiting Partnership Satellite, NOAA 20, previously known as JPS-1, NOAA 21, and also known as JPSS-2, and the upcoming JPSS-3 and JPSS-4 satellites.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
As part of AMSAT-DL's cooperation with the European Space Agency to prepare a future geostationary amateur radio payload project called Future GEO, a request for expression of interest was recently sent to national AMSAT organizations, amateur radio associations, and qualified experts worldwide. The aim is to identify potential partners who would like to actively participate in the definition and development of a new amateur radio payload for a future geostationary satellite. Contributions should include innovative technical ideas, experiences from previous missions, as well as concrete proposals for payloads, experiments, and educational initiatives. In particular, amateur radio organizations whose countries are members of the ESA or which are in the planned visibility range are addressed. This means Canada, Europe, North and South America, and Africa. Unfortunately, we have noticed that not all contact details in the AMSAT International Directory are up to date. International AMSAT organizations should submit updated contact information for key leaders to info@amsat.org to update this directory. If you are an organization that has not received an RFEI, but would like to actively participate, please contact AMSAT directly. The AMSAT Board of Directors and senior leadership will be submitting an expression of interest. A geostationary amateur radio satellite with a North American footprint has been sought for a very long time, and AMSAT is committed to providing AMSAT-DL with any support that we can provide in this endeavor.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes, so you won't have to remember calls, dates, URLs, or other details. You can just check the show notes. I received some feedback via YouTube that I would like to pass along. Monty 2020-I5D wrote, "You were spot on. I was able to reach Ohio and Dallas on 10 meters as a tech from Wisconsin. 10 meters has been dead ever since." Well, Monty, that's the nature of 10 meters, and currently is in that peak part of the cycle. It's going to come and go, and boy, when it's open, it's terrific. So don't give up on it yet. Even when it's at the bottom, it's always worth going out and calling CQ a couple times because when you hit it right. From Major Bailey 2368, I received, "Bill, thanks for a DX update and glad you got ZS8W for an all-time new one." Well, thank you, and I was glad too. So Major Bailey, keep up the good work and keep me in the loop. And finally, from @KellyBogus, I received, "Thank you for sharing with us. Long live shortwave radio, long live ham radio." I couldn't say it better. And thank you all for your comments and input. I really do take them to heart, and I try to make the changes where I can as you suggest. So you can always shoot me an email at thedxmentor@gmail.com. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the House DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll take care of it. Yarick, SQ5HG, is QRV from Tunisia until June 16th. He is operating 3 Victor 8 Sierra Sierra on sideband and digital modes on 160 through 10 meters, and you can QSL 3 Victor 8 SS via SQ5HG. PY1 SAD Aldir has arrived back in Guyana earlier this week and will be there until July 10th as 8 Romeo 1 Tango Mike on the bands during the weekdays between 2300 Zulu and 0200 Zulu, and more so during the weekends. He will be on CW sideband and digital modes on 1.8 through 50 megahertz and satellite, so you'll have a good chance to put Guyana in the log. The NATO summit is scheduled to be held at the World Forum in The Hague, Netherlands, on Tuesday, June 24th and Wednesday, June 25th. The special event station PA 2025 NATO and PH 25 NATO will be operating during the month of June. Additionally, PA 25 NATO will also join these operations. Now, I've worked these guys in the past, and you get beautiful QSL cards to commemorate this special event. So if you hear them, work them and QSL them. You won't be sorry. Coutura JP5 IHD will operate as JD1 BQP from the Ogasawara Islands between June 15th, so it's coming up, to the 21st. He arrives on the 14th and departs on the 23rd, and he'll be focusing on 20 to 6 meters, especially 6 meters. I would love to get Ogasawara on 6 meters. W5JON John will be operating V47JA from St. Kitts and Nevis, located 300 feet from the Caribbean Sea, June 15th to the 24th. John, you need somebody to carry your equipment, buddy. I'm the guy. He'll be operating on 160 through 6 meters, focusing on FT8 and single sideband, especially 6 meters. John will be using a Yaesu FTDX 3000 and an Elecraft KPA 500 amplifier with a Mosley MP32N, which covers 20, 15, and 10 meters. He'll also have a 33-foot vertical for 80 through 10 and a Yagi on 6 meters. You can QSL the V47JA, W5JON direct or via LOTW. Tony JA6CNL is QRV as K80N from the Mariana Islands until June 15th. QSL via his home call via the Bureau or direct. And I was shocked to work K80N the other day. He called CQ a couple times and nobody was answering him. I gave him a call and got him. So I was very excited to get the Mariana Islands in the log for 2025. My friend Dick, N9EEE, will be operating holiday style from C6A, which is the Bahamas, while on his family vacation from June 15th to the 20th. He's an avid CW QRPer, and his plans include 2 POTA activations as well as a beach activation from under a palm tree. Dick does it the right way. He'll be operating CW QRP only, so give C6A stroke N9EEE a listen and give him a call. Bob, ZL1RS, will be using YJ0RS in his QRV until June 28th from Ifate Island, primarily on 6 meters and FT8. He plans some 10-meter operation if and when 6 meters isn't open. Each moonrise and moonset, he will be doing 6-meter EME for about an hour each time. QSL through LOTW or Club Log or to his home QTH in New Zealand. Always good to get Vanuatu in the log when you can. The most recent DX Mentor podcast is available this weekend. Sarath VU2RS is the guest. Sarath has earned almost every operating award that you can earn, including the ARRL Humanitarian Award. He is a fantastic ambassador for India and ham radio, and you need to check this out. If you're interested in DX podcasts and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of the DX activities, and we'll always let you know what's going on. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
At the 2025 meeting of the World Radio Operators Foundation, WWROF, 3 supporting grants were approved. $10,000 to the Youth on the Air Camp, IARU Region 2 in Denver, Colorado. A $25,000 matching grant to the World Radio Sport Team Championship 2026 in the United Kingdom. And $11,000 to the Youth on the Air Camp, IARU Region 1 in Jamville, France this summer. For more information about WWROF, visit their website. The YASME Foundation has awarded the latest YASME Excellence Award to 4 radio amateurs: George Kutsageorge, W2VJN, Eric Nichols, KL7AJ, John Pertune, W6NBC, and Tomasz Siekaplowski, SP5CCC. The YASME board weighs a ham's technical, operating, or organizational achievements for consideration of the award. Each of these honorees is an active ARRL member. And you can read more on YASME at the ARRL.org website.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day, a fellow amateur asked me to help them with lowering their radio mast so they could do some maintenance on the antennas attached to it. This is not the first time I've been a participant in such an activity, but it was the first time I felt explicitly safe. Don't get me wrong, on previous occasions nothing bad happened, but there was always an undertone of what if and an associated anxiety. This time was different. Before we did anything, we sat down, had a cup of coffee, talked, and discussed what was going to happen. After coffee, we looked at specifics and discussed the process in detail. Then we prepared, clipping cable ties, winding up loose ends, disconnecting coax, and securing a pulley to a tree. We ran a winch line, discussed distances, looked at potential snags and coax lengths and angles, considered what would happen if something unexpected might happen, and discussed various safety considerations, like never walking below the mast whilst it was in its most stressed position, halfway lowered and out of reach. Then we slowly went about doing what we talked about. All that sounds pretty reasonable, and it should. It was the first time I'd ever discussed in detail what the plan was, what could happen if something broke, if something got caught, and any number of contingencies. We even discussed handling steel winch lines, something which I was unfamiliar with. Of course, it's entirely possible that something bad could happen, something neither of us had considered, but we put ourselves in a position where we both felt safe after mitigating known risks and allowing leeway for unknown risks. Another word for this type of preparation is professionalism. It's a fraught word. You might recall me telling a story where I contacted the regulator to discuss wideband interference caused by a train line, specifically blocking out a range of AM broadcast frequencies, including the emergency broadcast station. I revealed during that conversation that I was an amateur and had some experience with radio. The person I was speaking to shared that they were a professional, using a capital P to condescend that my amateur credentials were nothing in comparison to theirs. The conversation ended. The wideband interference is still there, years later. It's not the only time I've come across this weird relationship with this word, professionalism. At one time I worked at a community broadcaster where I was one of the producers and presenters. If you're unfamiliar, it's essentially a special interest broadcaster, in this case radio, run by mostly volunteers. We were having a meeting to discuss plans, and during that I raised the notion of professionalism in relation to conduct, things like turning up on time for your shift, documenting labels correctly on tapes, keeping logs, broadcasting advertisements at the allocated time, etc. Unfortunately, some in the group equated professionalism with commercialism and expressed their discontent with the notion vocally. I stopped volunteering there shortly after. This to say that I can understand that professionalism has different meanings for different people. In a community like amateur radio, it might mean that it's considered a taboo word, but I'd like to encourage you to think of it as a way of getting things done, safely and to the betterment of the community. So next time you have a working bee, an antenna party, a contest, or a hamfest, think about how you conduct yourself, how you might improve the experience for yourself and for those around you. I call that professionalism. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Step IR Communications will cease production of consumer antennas and accessories on August 31st, 2025. The company said, given our long history of impact and innovation, we don't take this decision lightly, but we have decided it's necessary for our ongoing operations and to make sure we can continue to effectively provide our existing customers with product support services. All antenna and spare parts orders will be fulfilled by the company through the end of August. After the 31st of the month, Step IR will sell spare parts as long as the inventory permits. Based in Washington State, the company has been well known in the amateur radio community since 2001. Step IR produces a variety of mechanically adjusted, remotely tuned, frequency-optimized HF-VHF Yagi, vertical, and dipole antenna systems which serve military, commercial, emergency communications, and consumer markets. The company will accept and fulfill all customer antenna and spare part orders placed by August 31st. There will not be any changes in terms of warranty service or technical support inquiries. A notice on the company's Facebook page states the change was made due to several emerging factors and is not taken lightly but necessary for ongoing operations. The first Step IR antennas for amateur radio were demonstrated at the 2001 Dayton Hamvention. Meanwhile, here is some information about the acquisition of OptiBeam antenna technologies by Waymo und Elektronik GmbH from OptiBeam President Thomas Schmenger, Delta Foxtrot 2 Bravo Oscar. OptiBeam Antenna Technologies was founded almost exactly 24 years ago by me, Thomas Schmenger, Tom, Delta Foxtrot 2 Bravo Oscar, and has been operated as a sole proprietorship ever since. OptiBeam has always stood for high-quality shortwave antennas in the high-performance segment and enjoys an excellent reputation worldwide for performance, robustness, and innovation. The OptiBeam brand is particularly valued by contesters, DXers, and discerning radio amateurs all around the world, and is one of the absolute leading antenna manufacturers on the global market. After 24 intense years and now 65 notches in the wood, it's time to steer my life into calmer waters. As of June 1st, 2025, all OptiBeam brand products will be fully and exclusively acquired by Waymo und Elektronik GmbH. With this acquisition, Waymo is integrating the renowned OptiBeam portfolio into its own product offering. Waymo will integrate the technical expertise and know-how gained from OptiBeam's many years of experience in antenna technology and will provide new impetus with its extensive service and sales network. The primary goal is to successfully continue OptiBeam's antennas, ensure long-term customer service and spare parts availability, and leverage development potential. A large part of the production is to be fully taken over by summer 25 at the latest. I will actively support the handover process until the end of 2025 to ensure knowledge transfer and smooth integration into Waymo's processes. I definitely didn't make this decision lightly. Among several potential buyers, I ultimately made a firm decision with full conviction in favor of Waymo. For me, it wasn't just about selling my company, but about ensuring that my life's work, my baby, finds a new solid home. With Waymo, I found a partner who not only has the necessary experience and infrastructure, but also shares the passion for high-quality antennas that has driven me all these years. With the transition to Waymo, customers gain the security of an established infrastructure, short delivery times, technical support, and continuous development at the highest level. In the coming months, Waymo will gradually make the most popular OptiBeam antenna models available again and offer them through its own online shop and international distribution partners. I thank our customers all over the world for your long-standing loyalty, your trust, and your support.
A silent key to report this week. Well-known and competitive contester Tom Tormina, K5RC W7RN, passed away on June 10th, 2025. He was a licensed amateur radio operator for 66 years and was inducted into the CQ Contest Hall of Fame in 2007. Along with his friend Grady Ferguson, W5FU, who is also a silent key, Tormina built the Comstock Memorial Station, W7RN, in Reno, Nevada, and hosted a long list of elite competitive operators. Tormina was an ARRL Life member. Fuel arrangements are pending. You can learn more about Tormina on his Facebook page.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
De-expeditioners heading to Micronesia, Equatorial Guinea, and Wallis Island are getting a financial boost from the Northern California DX Foundation. According to the 425 DX Bulletin, the 9-member team of German operators planning the V6D de-expedition to Micronesia in September has been named as one of the latest recipients of grant money to assist their activation. The team has scheduled operations from September 22nd through to October 6th. This is a group of seasoned de-expeditioners who have had a number of other successful radio adventures together. The Foundation is also supporting the 3C2MD de-expedition to Bioko Island in Equatorial Guinea. The operators are from the Mediterraneo DX Club, which has planned their activation from October 9th through to November 10th. Finally, Hannah Rosenfeld, W7HER, has received a grant for her role as an operator on the FW5K de-expedition to Wallis Island in the South Pacific. The participating de-expeditioners, including Hannah's father Scott, N7JI, are part of the team known as DX Obsessed. Hannah is a founder of W7DUX, the radio club at the University of Oregon, where she is an alumna. The de-expedition is set for October 20th through to November 7th.
Welcome to the 31st segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for giving us permission to use his website in the production of these segments. Now sit back and enjoy this chapter of Ham Radio History. The Chicago Plan. Amateurs were making progress taming the QRM problem. Sometimes a solution did not involve a new invention or even technology at all. In a drama worthy of a Broadway play, Central Division Manager R.H.G. Matthews, 9ZN, described the bleak situation in Chicago before the war. Acute rivalry between local clubs had resulted in gangs in the north, south, and west sides of the city, each having as a primary object the annihilation of the aerials of the others. The situation had gone from bad to worse. In fact, during the Washington's birthday tests, someone tore down Matthews' own aerial just before the relay began. A replacement was hurriedly erected, and then two friends sat out under the mast with .38 caliber cannons and chased away exactly 8 individuals, each with his little side-cutting pliers. Clearly, urban QRM was not the only problem arising from lack of cooperation. Something had to be done. Individual influential amateurs in each Chicago area met and worked together with ARRL City Manager Schnell to discuss the situation and come up with a plan they could all endorse. They formed an executive radio council that included officers from each constituent club, all of which were ARRL affiliates, to administer and regulate operations in the metropolitan area. New clubs were also formed in areas where no previous one existed. As a representative body with personal relationships among the officers, the council was able to get endorsements from the various groups. Their intent was to be fair to everyone, while at the same time not interfere with each individual group's activities. Cross-membership was encouraged. The dues were regulated to be all the same, and meeting dates were coordinated so as to avoid schedule conflicts. The average club size was about 100 members, and the most successful were the ones that concentrated on the social aspects of the hobby as well as the technical. The council went to great lengths to foster an environment of cooperation and friendship, the only way to obtain a foundation on which the authority of the council could be based. It drew up a set of 15 traffic regulations stipulating hours of operation, what kinds of operation could occur in each time period, operating procedures, and what defined local as opposed to long-distance work. It also defined the rule of traffic officers and their duties. Crucial to making this work was acknowledging that some hams were interested in long-distance experiments, but not necessarily in handling message traffic. Thus, there were 3 classes of operators: local, long-distance traffic, and long-distance non-traffic. No station was permitted to work both long-distance periods on the same night. This single new realization went a long way towards eliminating the friction between the groups. Each club handled enforcement under the coordination of the city manager. After investigating a violation, the club to which the offender belonged would be fined. If the offender was not a member of any club, the one in whose territory he resided would be fined. It was then up to that club to collect payment from the individual amateur, if possible, or ensure that no further violations occurred. But it turned out that the system worked so well that very few fines were ever charged. The council also organized a direction finder squad whose job was to locate unlicensed stations or other unidentified offenders. Proud of their accomplishment, Matthews boasted that these methods, combined with the loyal mutual cooperation of our big fraternal radio club families, have converted Chicago from a radio Bolshevist community to what I now believe it to be the best big radio city in the United States. The Chicago Plan, as it came to be known, was a model for cooperative operation. The Smith Cup was a one-time award in the form of a loving cup donated by Seymour Wemyss Smith of the Hartford Courant, an ARRL member, to be given to the amateur performing the most outstanding feat in the interest of citizen radio during the summer months as determined by a committee. R.S. Cruz, 3ABI, agreed to chair the selection committee and enlisted other well-known amateurs including Vermilia, 1ZE, Goat, 2JU, E.H. Merritt, 4YA, J.M. Clayton, 5ZL, A.E. Bessie, 6ZK, Royal Mumford, 7ZJ, Reverend A.J. Manning, and 8ZJ, and R.H.G. Matthews, 9ZN. What exactly could constitute a most outstanding feat was unspecified, but could include achievements in on-air operation, technology, organization, or publication. Regardless, the award was clearly aimed at summer when operating was more difficult. In spring 1922, the Smith Cup was awarded to the Chicago Executive Radio Council in recognition of the Chicago Plan. It is unclear whether Matthews, as a committee member, participated in the selection. For the first time, calls heard contained reports from stations hearing calls from every district, and 9CA and 9CG reported hearing both coasts at the same time, another first in a decade that would produce many more. Included in this material are quotes from the following: R.H.G. Matthews, The Chicago Plan, QSD, May 1921, page 23. A Cup for Summer Achievement, QSD, July 1921, page 25. Chicago Council Gets Smith Cup, QST, April 1922, page 31. With a tip of the TWIAR cap to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, to prepare this chapter, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The Wireless Institute of Australia, or WIA, released a statement earlier this week highlighting concerns regarding the proposal to restructure the International Amateur Radio Union into a single entity. While WIA acknowledged many benefits to the proposed changes, There were several areas WIA considered drawbacks. Concerns included potential risk of regional underrepresentation, financial implications, and increased administration requirements. WIA also voiced proposed remedies to their concerns, including regional-specific advisory groups, flexible fee structures, and safeguards around virtual participation, among others. The WIA remains committed to the mission and success of the IARU. However, unless and until their concerns are addressed in detail, we are not in favor of the proposal as it's currently presented, one person said. A copy of the full WIA response is available for download on the Wireless Institute of Australia's webpage.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Ham Radio 2025, the biggest amateur radio exhibition in Europe, will take place in Friedrichshafen, Germany, June 27th through the 29th. Over 11,000 people from 60 countries are expected to attend. There will be panel discussions, experiments, workshops, training courses, and competitions. ARRL will have a contingent there to greet many of our 6,000-plus international members. ARRL delegates include President Rick Roderick, Kilo 5 Uniform Romeo, International Affairs Vice President Rod Stafford, Whiskey 6 Romeo Oscar Delta, CEO David Minster, November Alpha 2 Alpha Alpha, Director of Marketing and Innovation Bob Interbitson, November Quebec 1 Romeo, and Radio Sport and Regulatory Information Manager Bart Yankee, Whiskey 9 Juliet Juliet. For more information, visit www.hamradio-friedrichshafen.com.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. As we previously mentioned, SO-125 has been activated for amateur use on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. The uplink is 145.875 MHz, and the downlink is 436.666 MHz, both FM. This will add to the other FM satellites and just in time for the ARRL and AMSAT Field Day in a few weeks. Besides the FM repeater aboard the ISS, you can listen to School Contacts. The crew transmits on 145.800 MHz FM worldwide. You may not hear the questions unless the crew repeats them, but you will hear their answers. Two of our longtime female satellite operators, Hope, KD2L, and Ruth, KM4LAO, wrote a paper entitled Empowering the Next Generation Through Space Communications. The paper was selected Best in the Next Generation, part of the Space Ops 2025 conference in Montreal. I personally know both of these young ladies, and this was a wonderful honor for them. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for the weekly solar weather and propagation forecast. On Friday, June 13th, spaceweather.com reported a co-rotating interaction region hit Earth's magnetic field, sparking a G2 class geomagnetic storm. There is a chance that this ongoing storm could intensify to a strong category. Overall, solar activity was at low levels, with only C-class flares observed over the past 48 hours. There were flares observed beyond the east limb, but no responsible region has yet come into view. Flaring was also observed just before 0600 UTC on June 12 from near region AR 4105, and while modeling is not yet complete, is not expected to have an Earth-directed component. All other regions were mostly quiet and stable in their size. Moderate geomagnetic storming returns on June 14, with a slight chance for strong levels, due to recurrent positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences. By June 15, conditions are anticipated to slowly diminish as coronal hole high-speed stream and coronal mass ejection effects weaken, resulting in periods of minor geomagnetic storming. A gradual trend towards a less disturbed solar wind environment is expected to transpire. By June 14, positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences are expected to begin, with elevated conditions likely to linger into June 15. Solar activity will temporarily increase slightly in the second half of June, but this will have little effect on shortwave propagation conditions. There is greater hope for a slight improvement and more interesting developments from mid-June onwards. However, shortwave propagation conditions in the last days of the month will again be less regular and slightly disrupted. So looking at the upcoming 10.7 cm flux values, it will be 118 on June 15th, 120 on June 16th and 17th, and 125 on June 18th. The predicted sunspot numbers will be hovering around 154. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the VOCAP Online for Ham Radio website.
In Radio Sport this week, more great contests. June 14th and the 15th, Portugal Day contest, CW and phone. June 14th and 15th, it's the REF-DD FM 6-meter contest, CW and phone. Also on June 14th and 16th, the ARRL June VHF contest, that's CW phone and digital. June 16th, the RSGB FT4 contest, digital. June 17th, the ICWC medium speed test, that's CW. June 18th, the phone weekly test, that's phone. June 19th, the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest, CW. The June 21st to the 22nd, the All Asian DX contest, CW. The SKCC QSO Party, CW. The IARU Region 150 megahertz contest, that's CW. Also on June 21st to the 22nd, the LZ International 6-meter contest, that is CW and phone. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on June 21st, the Knoxville Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Tennessee State Convention. That's in Knoxville, Tennessee. July 12th, the Story Valley Amateur Radio Club Hamfest, hosting the ARRL North Dakota Section Convention. On July 13th, the Suckig, New Jersey Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Hudson Division Convention. And on July 26th, the ARRO West Virginia State Convention and Hamfest, that's in Sutton, West Virginia. A silent key to report this week. Well-known and competitive contester Tom Tormina, K5RC W7RN, passed away on June 10th, 2025. He was a licensed amateur radio operator for 66 years and was inducted into the CQ Contest Hall of Fame in 2007. Along with his friend Grady Ferguson, W5FU, who is also a silent key, Tormina built the Comstock Memorial Station, W7RN, in Reno, Nevada, and hosted a long list of elite competitive operators. Tormina was an ARRL Life member. Fuel arrangements are pending. You can learn more about Tormina on his Facebook page.
A ninth grader from Ukraine, Alexander Kalenyuk, from the city of Malin, Zhytomyr region, developed his own technology for manufacturing a radio transmitting and receiving antenna exclusively for controlling UAVs. The world of electronics was discovered by Alexander by his father, who became his mentor and scientific supervisor. The boy assembled his first device at the age of 7, so amateur radio became one of his many hobbies. At the age of 11, with the support of his parents, he received an amateur radio license and the corresponding call sign, which allowed him to work on the radio. Since then, the world has lost its borders because in a few minutes the young lad in a war-ravaged country can communicate with radio amateurs from a wide variety of countries. Like most radio amateurs, my dad and I made all the antennas and additional equipment ourselves, gaining new knowledge and experience, he said. The schoolboy was prompted to search for new technologies by the war, namely the urgent need to manufacture antennas designed to control UAVs on non-standard frequency ranges and via a repeater. According to this young ham, we won't disclose his call, it is the advantage of his technology to allow for the manufacture of lightweight and durable antennas with high precision, not only in the form of flat structures, but also in the form of complex three-dimensional models. Such an antenna is extremely flexible and does not require special expensive equipment, and the process from theoretical calculations of a new product to receiving a small batch of antennas takes less than a day, the ninth grader added.
The 2025 Youth on the Air, or YOTA, Camp for Young Amateur Radio Operators in North, Central, and South America will operate special event station W0Y while camp is in session from June 15th through the 20th in the Denver suburb of Thornton, Colorado. The group also plans to contact the International Space Station, complete portable and mobile activations for Summits on the Air, Parks on the Air, Buck-ees on the Air, and operate from WWV. It will live stream the ARIS contact as well as opening and closing ceremonies on YouTube. Campers will operate from the Bob Heil K9EID Memorial YOTA Camp Amateur Radio Shack in person and remotely as they finish projects between sessions and during free time. Activation of the W0Y call sign from the camp will begin the evening of Sunday, June 15th, and conclude at 1800 Zulu on Friday, June 20th. Camper Jack McElroy, KM4ZIA, is partnering with Edge of Space Sciences to launch a high-altitude balloon to near space and 2 Pico balloons which hopefully will circumnavigate the Earth. The high-altitude balloon will launch either on Monday evening, June 16th, or Tuesday morning, June 17th, depending on the weather. For more details about this camp, visit youthontheair.org/Denver 2025.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
The ARRL has welcomed the year's first cohort of educators to attend a session of the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, or TI, at headquarters this week. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more.
The group follows on the success of the Louisiana-based session a week ago and one at Staten Island in New York City this past January. The educators traveled from all over the country to attend and learn how to take radio and wireless technology back into the classroom as part of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM lessons. Many of the teachers took and passed their amateur radio license exam during the week, including Professor Charnel Long, Ph.D. She is a professor at North Carolina A&T University who worked with pre-service educators to become certified teachers. She hopes to be a multiplying force for the information. It was fun to me, said Long. It is an opportunity to do a deep dive into radio in ways I never have before. She will incorporate the hands-on training into her courses at the university. Long learned about the program when ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, exhibited TI at the National Science Teachers Association Convention. I see value in bringing my students scientific skills, said Long. And while Professor Long and the other newly minted radio amateurs in the cohort wait for their call signs to be issued, they continue to get hands-on training with radio. To see these educators have fun learning new things is a real boost, not only to the ARRL Education and Learning Department, but for the future of ham radio as well, said Goodgame. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Goodgame is encouraged by the reach just one participant in TI could have. We're always excited to get educators hands-on with radio, but especially those who take what they learn here and go back and teach it to other educators, he said. Professor Long is one microcosm of ARRL's focus on multiplying the reach of TI's impact. The ARRL Board of Directors voted unanimously in July 2024 to authorize taking the high-quality education of TI to communities across the country, increasing the number of teachers and therefore students reached by the training is one peg of the mission to inspire the next generation of radio amateurs.
The largest island in the state of Washington is Whidbey Island, connected to the United States mainland by bridge and ferry, and perhaps even more importantly these days, by radio. As of the weekend ending, on Saturday, June 8th, 8 new amateur radio operators have received their licenses on Whidbey Island. These newcomers are contributing to an important momentum on this island in Puget Sound, where ham radio operators from the Island County Amateur Radio Club have been giving top priority to emergency preparedness following a recent conference on the subject held by the South Whidbey Fire and EMS. Response from that conference inspired the hams to host the weekend test preparation class, which ended with the amateur radio exam itself. One of the instructors, Bob Keaton, Kilo 7, Mike Hotel Juliet, said that with the new amateurs on board, the next step is to get island neighborhoods organized for improved radio response in a crisis. A neighborhood representative with a GMRS radio would be able to communicate with a ham who also holds a GMRS license, and together they would gather damage assessment data and pass that along to the county. Bob, a retired police officer, said that the hams have the ability to use WinLink peer-to-peer and VAR-ACFM to reach the Emergency Operations Center. As volunteer civilian coordinator between the hams and the Island County Department of Emergency Management, Bob knows that living near an earthquake-prone fault line, such as the Cascadia subduction zone, requires this kind of readiness. He said, "Anytime we can add another link in our amateur network, I am happy."
It is time once again for AMSAT satellite shorts from all over, and in this week's truncated edition, we see that the FCC has denied AST Space Mobile's request to use 430 through 440 megahertz for telemetry operations, noting there is no space tracking or space telemetering allocation in the 430 to 440 megahertz frequency range. And a paper by Hope Leah, KD2L, and Ruth Willett, KM4LAO, entitled Empowering the Next Generation Through Space Communication, was selected Best in the Next Generation part of the Space Ops 2025 conference in Montreal. This paper discussed the amateur radio on the International Space Station project and youth on the air. AMSAT congratulates them on their outstanding work.
The 2025 ARRL June VHF contest is this weekend, starting at 1800 UTC on Saturday, June 14th, and concluding at 0259 UTC on Monday, June 16th. Late spring weather brings enhanced tropospheric ducting and meteor scatter, plus it's the peak of the sporadic E season. Take advantage of these propagation enhancements and have some fun on the VHF and UHF bands. ARRL Contest Program Manager Paul Bork, N1SFE, who is also an active 6-meter operator, says that it could be the band to watch. Propagation on 6 meters has had some wonderful surprises, with openings from the east coast to Europe, as well as transcontinental propagation being reported in recent weeks, he said. The exchange is the 4-digit Maidenhead grid square you're operating from. For more info on grid squares, visit www.arrl.org/grid-squares. All authorized modes on the bands 50 MHz and higher are permitted to be used in the contest. You don't need to have a powerhouse contest station to enjoy this event. If you have an HF rig that includes 6 meters and VHF/UHF capability, you've got just the tools you need to join in the fun of this contest. With good conditions, stations hundreds of miles away can be worked via Tropo, Meteor Scatter, and E-Skip. With several different categories in which to participate, there's something to match your favorite style of operating. Single operator participants can enter in either all mode or analog only CW/phone categories. From seasoned contest veterans to newly licensed technicians, VHF contesting is a great way to have fun on the bands this weekend.
If you are planning to attend this year's convention of the Radio Society of Great Britain, you can do something more than simply mark your calendar for the dates in October and then show up. Attendees will be arriving at Kents Hill Conference Center in Milton Keynes on the 10th of October for the 3-day RSGB convention. The RSGB is hoping that many of those in attendance will also help shape the content of the conference by bringing a project, a paper for presentation, or plans for a practical session. If you want to get involved, share your ideas with the RSGB and let them know what you have planned. Send your proposals to convention@rsgb.org.uk. Meanwhile, satellite enthusiasts will be pleased to know that, as before, AMSAT UK will hold its colloquium during the convention.
A small group of amateurs living in different cities throughout Iran joined together over the airwaves recently to give the world its first ham radio history and cultural lesson on the Persian Gulf. It was a moment for the 11 ham radio operators who got on the air June 7, calling CQ on sideband as a special event station EP2PG. Using modest home-based equipment with 100 watts of power or less, the operators faced less than ideal conditions on the HF bands. Still, it was a proud moment as the hams of Echo Papa 2 Persian Gulf celebrated the historical and cultural significance and shared it with the world. One of the operators, Morteza, EP5APP, said that the team's focus was on making as many DX contacts as possible in the interest of friendship and unity, and, of course, to share the victory and story of the Gulf, which was one of the world's oldest maritime regions. The team achieved that goal, logging more than 360 QSOLs from 60 DX countries around Europe, Asia, Oceania, and the Americas. Morteza went on to say this activity was entirely self-funded and carried out by volunteers with a shared passion for radio and a strong desire to make the voice of Iran heard in a positive, non-political, and welcoming way. They're ready to do it again next year, hoping to exchange even more stories and, of course, QSL cards.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone. Headset mics are not used. And be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
And our final story this week comes from the United Kingdom. When you're first starting out in amateur radio, you can't borrow confidence in getting on the air, but now in the UK, you can borrow something that's almost as helpful. A new program created especially to help hams under the age of 18 who are just starting their radio journeys. The DMR project, launched recently by the Radio Society of Great Britain, is a way to provide opportunity and radio equipment for new young amateurs to become accustomed to making QSOs on a regular basis. The outreach team's new DMR kit contains DMR handheld transceivers and hotspots to borrow for as long as 3 months at no cost. Accompanying the equipment, of course, is the opportunity to use it, and the RSGB's team will also be hosting regularly scheduled youth nets to give as many participants as possible a good start. Licensed hams or school groups with at least one licensee are eligible to apply to use the kits. Meanwhile, the Society is also encouraging teachers to establish school clubs and to become amateurs themselves. Funding from the Radio Communications Foundation will cover the cost of up to 9 teachers' exams.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to w2xbs77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.